Review: National Democrats' lawsuit against Trump's executive order, a hit piece disguised as journalism. Kyle Cheney's Politico article, National Dems Sue Over Trump Executive Order They Say Could Weaponize FEC, is a textbook example of a left-leaning hit piece masquerading as a news report. Rather than providing an objective analysis of the situation, the article is laced with alarmist rhetoric, questionable legal assertions, and a predictable anti-Trump narrative that Democrats and their media allies have been pushing for years. 1. Fear-mongering over executive power. The central argument of Cheney's article hinges on the idea that Donald Trump is somehow weaponizing the Federal Election Commission, FEC, through an executive order that asserts his constitutional authority over independent agencies. The Democrats claim that this move would allow Trump to wield unchecked power over campaign finance decisions, tilting the playing field in his favor for future elections. However, Cheney conveniently omits a crucial fact. The President of the United States has the constitutional authority to oversee executive agencies, and independent agencies have long operated within the broader scope of the executive branch. The idea that Trump's order is an unprecedented power grab is laughable, considering the Biden administration's history of exerting control over independent agencies, whether through regulatory overreach or the blatant politicization of agencies like the Department of Justice, DOJ, and the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. Democrats' selective outrage is nothing more than a veiled attempt to maintain their grip on the very institutions they have already exploited for political gain. 2. The hypocrisy of bipartisan concerns. Cheney parrots Democratic talking points about the supposed bipartisan nature of the FEC, warning that Trump's executive order would replace bipartisan consensus with the judgment of a single partisan political figure, the President of the United States. This concern is both hypocritical and misleading. For decades, Democrats have pushed their own political agenda through bureaucratic agencies, often circumventing Congress to impose leftist policies without Democratic accountability. Under Biden, the FEC has been anything but impartial, frequently ruling in ways that favor Democratic candidates and organizations. For example, recent FEC rulings have allowed Democrats to exploit campaign finance loopholes while cracking down on Republican fundraising mechanisms. If the Democrats were truly concerned about nonpartisan governance, they would have taken issue with past executive overreach, including Biden's unilateral student loan forgiveness plan and his administration's aggressive targeting of conservative groups through the IRS. 3. The manufactured crisis over election integrity. Cheney's article operates under the assumption that Trump's executive order is a direct threat to democracy itself, an absurd notion given the recent history of how election-related institutions have been managed. The piece implies that if Trump is allowed to exert control over the FEC, he will use it to rig elections, yet there is no evidence to support this claim. On the contrary, the Democratic Party has consistently pushed for changes to election laws that weaken security and transparency, such as universal mail-in ballots, the weakening of voter ID laws, and ballot harvesting operations that disproportionately benefit their candidates. Cheney's framing of the issue ignores the reality that the true threats to fair elections have come from Democratic-led initiatives that erode election integrity, rather than from any potential executive order that affirms presidential authority. 4. An attempt to preemptively undermine 2026 elections. While Democrats couch their lawsuit in lofty language about preserving democracy, the timing of this lawsuit suggests a more strategic motivation. The article acknowledges that Democrats are struggling to find their footing in a political landscape, where they are out of power in Congress and facing the potential of further losses in 2026. This lawsuit appears to be less about the integrity of the FEC and more about setting up a narrative that, if Democrats lose the midterms, it will be because Trump rigged the system. This is the same playbook Democrats ran in 2016 when they preemptively undermined Trump's presidency by pushing the Russia collusion hoax. Now, they are attempting to delegitimize the FEC in anticipation of an election they fear they will lose on policy and public sentiment. 5. Media bias at its finest. Cheney's article is a case study in media bias. Rather than presenting a neutral assessment of the lawsuit, he adopts the Democratic Party's framing wholesale, portraying Trump as a would-be dictator while presenting the Democratic lawsuit as a noble stand for democracy. Nowhere does Cheney challenge the DNC's claims, provide historical context about presidential authority over independent agencies, or offer a conservative perspective on the issue. The article's tone, structure, and selective inclusion of details reveal its true purpose: to advance a political narrative rather than inform readers with an unbiased account of the legal and constitutional arguments at play. Conclusion: a transparent political hit job. Ultimately, this Politico article is nothing more than a hit piece designed to push a left-wing narrative ahead of the 2026 midterms. The Democrats' lawsuit is a desperate attempt to delegitimize Trump's presidency and create an excuse for future electoral losses. Cheney's reporting lacks critical analysis, historical perspective, and fairness, making it yet another example of how the mainstream media has abandoned journalism in favor of partisan activism. Rather than focusing on real issues facing Americans, such as inflation, crime, border security, and government overreach, Democrats and their media allies are once again manufacturing a crisis to distract from their own failures. If anything, this lawsuit underscores just how terrified Democrats are of facing a political landscape where they can no longer manipulate institutions to their advantage.